Well, hi, and welcome to our first Q&A session for this track. My name is Jason Elkin. I'm a freshly minted MVP, and I'm here with Julia, who just gave us a talk on web components. We're going to be posing your questions to her, which you'll be able to answer.
Hopefully.
They'll be easy. They'll be fine. And just a reminder, I guess, if you have the Umbraco app, which you must have, then please do put questions in there. We've not run out of time yet for this session. But also throughout other sessions throughout the day.
It's a great app. Go get it now.
Does it use web components? That's the question.
I have no idea. Probably not, though.
And yes, we've got a microphone that can move around if people have burning questions in the room as well. And I guess I'll get cracking and ask you some of these easy questions. Be good. So the first one that I've got that's come in is a question about lit and whether is lit magic? Is it doing too much? What's the real benefit of lit versus vanilla JS, and is lit future-proof enough, do you think?
So, is it magic? Well, no, it is not magic. Does it look magical? Maybe it doesn't look magical to me, or at least it doesn't look more magical than any other framework. Well, it does, apart from vanilla and all the helping stuff, attaching shadow roots where they should be, and so on, it does DOM updates for us in a performant, neat way. It happens asynchronously, it happens in batches. I mean, if you want to do it manually, be my guest, but I wouldn't really take this task and then be able to do my daily work, because it would just take a lot of time to optimize. So no, maybe it looks a bit magical with all these decorators and stuff, but for me it's not really magical. For me it's good developer experience. Then it has the template, the templating engine. So you can write your loops, you can write your conditional render stuff that wasn't really in my presentation. Maybe it should be, but there wasn't enough time for everything. But this just improves the comfort. And is it too much? Well, it has no dependencies. It's built only, lit is built only on these two APIs. It's a very small, so in like minimum version, because it has quite a lot of things aside and it's growing, but in the minimum version, it's only this base class and decorators. If you want them, you don't have to use them. You can just use vanilla. So there's a lot of vanilla there. Templating is also based on vanilla JavaScript. So and there is no, like, even that's a nice thing with web components, that even if you're developing an app that is based on lit and there's lit everywhere, you don't have to use it. You can write your vanilla stuff if you like it, or if lit collides in any way with what you want to do, because that might be the case. So if your framework bothers you, then just take a web component, do it vanilla. That's this interoperability that I talked about, that it not only works everywhere, but it also allows you to just opt out if your framework or your whatever builds your application is bothering you to create some feature. It happens sometimes. Then you can just jump out.
I noticed Jezreel is back with us. Do come and have a seat, because you gave the talk just before this one, which was about Angular elements, which is web components, but using Angular as opposed to lit. What's the difference there?
Yeah, I guess you could say it that way. Whereas web components is the base of them all, but for the one that I've talked to is mostly using just the Angular framework that leveraging the web components functionality.
Okay, Cool. So we've got some more questions. So I might pose this one to both of you, actually. So when thinking about web components, how does one glue them together? So the example I've got is from the new back office. Is it that you're using one big component and then lots of little components inside it? Or do you need to use a framework? What are the options? I'll ask Jez first, actually, if that's right.
I guess the question if you have to use a framework is more on personal preference of the organization. Just like I mentioned, for us, we really love working with Angular, so it's what we immediately think of when we build the application from our end, since we are planning to migrate from monolithic to microservice later on.
And what about then the Umbraco back office? Is what well, you mentioned the RFC. What's happening there with regards to framework and
I can't really say much about the back office because I'm on the cloud team. So I read the RFC, but you have to ask the specific back office questions to some people who actually know better what's happening there. That would be the front-end team and Jacob. But it is, again, I'm afraid that I'm just going to end up repeating myself, but back office is a very specific application because it's kind of like a framework itself because it has all these extension points and you can build your own editors and do all this magic, and that's what it makes it so popular. So for that, web components are kind of perfect match. Then lit is just a helper. Again, we recommend it to keep it consistent in the RFC, but it's not really mandatory in any way. Sorry, I'm just looking at my colleague.
Make sure your answer is diplomatic enough. Good, well done.
You could use Angular.
Yes. And then I guess if you're asking if a framework is mandatory or not, no, it's not. We built Cloud Portal without a framework. We just use web components and some smart APIs we made around them. It's coming out pretty nice. It has its own, like everything, it has its own difficulties here and there. But for now, it's going really nice. There was one more part in this question. How do you organize these components within components? So, well, you do it as you please. It may sound like a silly answer, but that's the truth. I don't think there's really one way. That little bit depends on what you're building. So I like component to do one particular thing.
Yeah.
So I try to organize them that way, but then I sometimes end up with some you can put everything into one component and then it has like 1,000 lines and then you have to run around and search it. So so you can also use just some, let's call it classic design patterns. You can create a service and then have it there. So I guess that's the answer.
Yeah.
You do it as you please.
Yeah. I guess
as it makes sense.
Add on that question as well. I think one of the good thing, at least again for us, with using a framework such as Angular is that we all know that Angular is very opinionated. So we all know that there's a certain way on how you do things. Mm-hmm. So you don't have to think about on where this thing should go, where this folder structure would look like. So I think that's also one of the things that will help you.
Definitely.
Cool.
Definitely. You get some nice architecture from your framework, but then you are bound to it. So I think every developer should weight that on their own.
Yeah, yeah.
So it fits the product and priorities so that you have.
So in both your demos, we had CSS. as part of the web components. This is my question. How do you go about, so when you're building like a library, because you both mentioned having component libraries, how are you making those styles? Because obviously everything is sort of isolated in the Shadow DOM in your component. How do you have consistent styles? Is there anything special you're doing in CSS behind the scenes to make sure that the same colors are used throughout and that kind of thing? How do you do that?
So we use custom properties for that to keep the colors consistent, because this is one thing that goes into the Shadow DOM. So you can define them on the root and then just put them in the web component. Then don't forget the fallback value. It's really important, because if they are not present, then your component will render some, or won't it render at all? I don't remember, but it's going to be broken. So fallback value is very important. But this is also a native feature. You don't need SAS or something. It's not going to work with Shadow DOM, I guess. Now there are some handy-dandy NPM packages for that too, but but I think with custom properties, it's not really that necessary. You can do really cool stuff with them, especially with all the new, not that new, but all the calc functions and clamps and so on. You can animate gradients with custom properties, which was like, I think, a holy grail of CSS for a long time. But you can do it with custom properties. And then, at least with lit, because you also write styles as this tag template literal. It's not that you can't really put expressions in there, in the contrary to the template, because they live on a static property on your element. So
gotcha. Yep.
they are like they are defined per not per instance, but per class definition. So you can't really put expressions in there. Lit has all the mechanisms for dynamic styling. But you can also share them. You can just define, it's like CSS in JS a bit, but you can just, it's just a string.
Yeah.
And then Lit takes it and compiles it and makes it performant for you. So you can just share your styles as constances, as strings, pretty much.
You doing the same sort of thing?
I think it depends on the intention of the custom elements, or the custom elements. Because one, if your intention is for it to inherit the styling of the application where you're going to import it, and then I guess again from our use case, we sometimes don't use Shadow DOM. If that is the intention, because the main application already has some styling that's already defined in there. And then what we really wanted to do with the custom elements that we are creating is just to build the functionality that we want. And then once we import it in the application, it just inherits the styling of that application. But again, if it's a library that you want to be used in other applications as well, then that's the time that we use Shadow DOM, because we don't want the styling of the other application to, I guess, affect the elements that we built, or the library that we built. So,
yeah, thank you. That's very helpful. I've got a really long question here that I need to read carefully so I get it right. How does data binding work in components? Is it similar to the current AngularJS style where we pass values as attributes? And it goes on, sorry. How do we flow data back out from components, i.e. click a button, change a value on a parent ancestor component? So there's a lot to cover there in one question.
So I'll just go ahead first.
Yeah.
For the Angular, it's pretty much the same as your regular Angular application. Just like what I showed in the demo, that you can leverage the input decorator to pass data from parent to child, and then use the output decorator to send out some data from the child to parent. And then, again, one thing that is good with Angular for custom components is that even though you create multiple custom elements, as long as they are built in the same application, they will be able to share data across each other. So I think that's very beneficial. You don't have to do some extra work, I guess, I should say.
And with so with lit implementation, you can share data through properties and through attributes. They have some special bindings and reactive properties. They have their own converters because, well, we can initialize some property with an attribute, but we can also assign it in the template. In lit template, we can assign the value straight to the property. And the data goes one way, which is down, so from parent to child through props, through these properties. And then up, it goes with events. So this is also something that is, I think, Vue has this type of data structure. Yeah. Vanilla web component, you do it as you please, as you like. It's not covered, but in lit it's one way. So you have to cope with things like prop drilling when you pass data through properties down, and you have to pass it down on the way. But there is a really nice way of avoiding it, and it's called context API. So this is also like a baby standard, which maybe one day will go into the browser. Now you have to build it yourself. It is also event based, and then you can request some data from the component who is the distant ancestor of your component, and then you're going to get it back as a reference. So we set it up ourselves in the cloud portal a little bit as a prototype of what's going to happen in back office. But it works really good. It doesn't cover reactivity, though, so this is something you have to implement on your own on top of that. But it only solves the problem of the prop drilling and writing dot something equals this and this in all your components. So so you can have some ancestor component that holds some data for all its children. That's why slots are so cool, because slots are actually children of this element, so they can also request. You can request it from the shadow. Somewhere through the shadow DOM, the event bubbles up. But slotted elements can also request anything from the parent. So you can, and then the parent can capture the events from slotted elements. So it's really nice. So basic example, if you want some interaction to start on click, but you don't know which. Well, in one place, it's a... so let's assume it's a dialog, but in one place in your application, you click one type of button. In the other place, you do it in some other way by clicking something else, but then you can wrap this dialog in a component that's going to have a slot, and then the component will listen to the click event from whatever is in the slot. So it's nice and flexible in that way.
Cool, cool. Thank you both. I've just got a couple more. I don't know what time I'm supposed to finish. Someone will shout at me, I'm sure.
So before you ask the next question, I guess one thing to add with the managing the data is also, so aside from the input decorator and the output decorator, you can also leverage the observable as service observable, yeah, so you can pass data along. And also, you can use third parties like NGRX and JXS for your state management. But again, if it's just a simple custom element, I think it's overkill to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense. So just a quick question for both of you. Are your demo files available somewhere? If so, where?
So I didn't really have had a demo. But there is a nice place in the web. It's called webcomponents.dev.
Okay.
It's an online IDE with how is it called? With template preset web components in pretty much any way you can write web component. You can pick a vanilla template, you can pick lit template, you can pick anything else, any other template. So it's a really nice place to go and explore and play around and also compare, because it's really like there's like 30 different ways of doing it, and really many different implementations of custom elements and Shadow DOM. Some of them look object-oriented, some of them are more functional and more like React way. So really choose your flavor. And the fun part is that they will still talk to each other.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
So mine is available in my GitHub repo. I showed it in the slide, but you can just search Jazz Maghuyop on GitHub. I just uploaded this early this morning, so
excellent.
it's the exact same application that I showed earlier. So.
And then the one more question I've got on here then is in using web components, is there anything special we need to do for our either back-end or front-end views to be able to use them? What's the kind of, can we just, drop our custom tag in? Does it just work? How does sort of bootstrapping these custom elements into a page actually happen?
So the simplest way is to write your element as an ES module and stick it up with a script tag in the head of your document, and then you can just use it as you would use any native element. So you just write your cool custom tag in braces and add some attributes if you configured them. So in vanilla way, you have something called observed attributes, and there's another callback I didn't really cover in the talk that's called observed attributes callback, and that's going to run every time the attribute change. So then you have to kind of bind your properties to the attributes. That's also why lit is so nice, because it does that for you. So each property gets an attribute automatically. Break. I'm not saying any more words.
Now we know.
Now I have a break. Thank you, and thank you for coming, and love your web components. They are really awesome. You don't have to use lit if you hate it. Then you pick something else. There's even one library that has like a Halloween pumpkin, so maybe you like that instead.
Well, thank you both so much.
Thank
Have
you.
a round of applause for both of you that left. Brilliant. Thank you.